You know that moment when two sheriff's cruisers roll up because your neighbor decided a plastic water slide was basically a terrorist threat? That was my Tuesday. Sirens bouncing off the pool tiles. Kids frozen mid-splash. And there she stood, Karen Whitaker. HOA compliance chair. Floral visor glowing like a crown. Pointing at my bright blue slide like she'd just busted Pablo Escobar's summer home. My name is Tyler Grant. I'm a single dad. Freelance architect. And the reluctant owner of what used to be the quietest corner of Oakwood Glen. The house came from my dad, who built half the original neighborhood back when community standards meant waving at your neighbor instead of fining them for the wrong mulch. He passed 2 years ago, leaving me the property, a stack of old blueprints, and one simple promise: never let them take your joy. I tried to keep that promise. After the divorce, the house felt too quiet. My kids, Lily, 8, and Max, 6, needed something that felt like summer again. So I restored the old pool he built in the 80s. Got every city permit in triplicate. Hired a licensed contractor. And added a modest curved slide that dropped into the deep end. Nothing crazy. Just bright blue joy on a grandfathered lot that, according to the original 1987 deed, sits outside HOA jurisdiction entirely. My dad never signed it over. Smart man. Karen moved in 6 months earlier and immediately treated the neighborhood like her personal fiefdom. Former corporate compliance officer. Now self-appointed guardian of beige. She started small, polite little notes about my non-compliant mailbox flag. My grass being a scandalous 1/4 inch too tall. I paid the stupid $50 fines just to avoid drama. Big mistake. That taste of power went straight to her head like cheap Chardonnay. The slide arrived on a Thursday morning. The contractor's truck had barely backed into the driveway when Karen materialized on her lawn like a heat-seeking missile. Clipboard in one hand, phone in the other. Pastel polo tucked into khakis so stiff they could stand by themselves. "Excuse me," she called across the street. Voice syrupy sweet. "What exactly is being installed on your property today?" The contractor, a big guy named Mike who'd built half the pools in the county, just smiled. "Water slide. Ma'am. All permitted." Karen's smile didn't waver, but her eyes narrowed to slits. HOA approval is required for any structural addition. Section 8.4 of the covenants is very clear. I stepped out onto the porch holding the folder I'd been waiting to use. "Morning, Karen." "Actually, it's not. Lot 9B is grandfathered. Check the county records if you want." My dad made sure of it. She laughed, a short, brittle sound. "We'll see about that." Then she turned on her heel. Already dialing. That afternoon the first squad car showed up. Then a second. Karen stood in my driveway like she was directing traffic at a felony scene. Visor tilted at a righteous angle. "Officer. He's violating community safety codes," she announced. Loud enough for the whole cul-de-sac to hear. "That thing is an eyesore and a hazard. Children could be injured. Property values are at risk." The younger deputy peered over my fence at 3 kids, mine plus the neighbors, screaming with laughter as they took turns on the slide. He looked back at Karen. Then at me. "Sir. You got permits?" I handed them over. City stamps. Engineer approval. Insurance. The works. The older deputy flipped through them, sighed, and turned to Karen. "Ma'am. Everything here checks out. This isn't even in your jurisdiction." Karen's face did something fascinating, first confusion, then the kind of outrage usually reserved for people who cut in line at Starbucks. But the aesthetics, she sputtered. The covenants clearly state. Covenants don't override county law. Ma'am, the deputy said. Already walking back to his car. Have a nice day. She stood there for a full 10 seconds after they left. Mouth opening and closing like a landed fish. Then she spun toward me. Voice low and venomous. This isn't over. Mr. Grant. Not by a long shot. And oh. She meant it. The next 6 weeks became a masterclass in bureaucratic terrorism. Daily emails. Courtesy notices. Urgent violation alerts. She started a whisper campaign in a neighborhood Facebook group, never naming me directly. Of course. But everyone knew. Some residents think they're above the rules. Unsafe modifications affecting our children's safety. Someone even started calling my slide the blue tumor. I stayed quiet. Smiled. Waved. Documented everything. Every time-stamped email. Every photo she took from the sidewalk. Every time she casually walked her yappy little dog past my house at 9 p.m. With a flashlight. My dad taught me early, the loudest guy in the room is usually the weakest. So I let her scream into the void while I built my case like a fortress. She escalated beautifully. Find my neighbor, Mr. Patel for inconsistent hedge height the week after he let my kids borrow his ladder. Sent the landscape committee after Mrs. Alvarez because her roses were too vibrant. The whole street started walking on eggshells. People stopped waving. Kids quit biking past my house. One night I caught her on my security camera, standing on a step stool. Trying to film over my fence at 11:47 p.m. I spoke through the speaker nice and calm, evening. Karen. Private property. Smile for the camera. She nearly fell off the stool. The next morning another bright orange safety violation sticker appeared on my gate. She'd started printing her own official-looking ones. Cute. Then came the emergency HOA meeting. She packed the community clubhouse. Folding chairs. Bottled water. The faint smell of desperation and Febreze. Karen stood at the front in a blazer so starched it looked bulletproof. Projector ready. Slideshow titled Protecting Our Community Standards. She opened strong. This isn't personal, she lied. But when one homeowner believes he's above the rules, it affects us all. Click. Photo of my slide. Zoomed in dramatically. Visual pollution. Liability nightmare. Diminished property values. A few people nodded. The scared ones. I waited until she finished her performance. Then stood up from the back row. The room got very quiet. Karen, I said pleasantly. Since we're all about evidence tonight, mind if I share a few files? She smiled the smile of someone who still thought she was winning. If they're relevant. I handed a USB drive to the treasurer. The projector flickered to life. First clip, Karen on my property line at night. Flashlight sweeping. Muttering. I'll catch him violating something if it's the last thing I do. Gasps. Second clip, her arguing with the county inspector 2 weeks earlier. Voice shrill. That can't be right. I have photographic evidence. Third clip, the original cop call. Her pointing at laughing children like they were committing war crimes. The room temperature dropped 10 degrees. Karen's face went from confident to corpse white to nuclear red in about 4 seconds. Those are taken out of context. He's harassing me. The county inspector, who I'd quietly invited, stood up from the third row. Actually, Mrs. Whitaker. I handled the inspection myself. Lot 9B is exempt. Has been since 1987. The HOA has zero authority here. Dead silence. Then the older deputy from the first visit, who I'd also given a quiet heads up, cleared his throat from the back. We've also received multiple complaints about false emergency calls. That's a misdemeanor. Ma'am. Karen looked around the room like a cornered animal. Her usual allies suddenly found the floor fascinating. Her husband, sitting in the front row, just stared at his shoes like he'd seen this movie before and knew how it ended. She tried one last swing. I was protecting the community. Someone has to enforce standards. I kept my voice low and even. You weren't protecting anything. You were terrified of losing control. And now everyone gets to watch what happens when the mask slips. The board president finally found his spine. I think we should adjourn. Immediately. All enforcement actions against Mr. Grant are suspended. Pending a full review. Karen's printed citations fluttered to the floor as her hands shook. Nobody helped her pick them up. The collapse was swift and beautiful. Within a week the county opened a formal investigation into her misuse of emergency services. The neighborhood Facebook group flipped overnight, people posting screenshots of her old threats like it was a victory lap. Mr. Patel brought over homemade samosas. Mrs. Alvarez sent flowers. Even the quiet ones started waving again. Karen disappeared from public view. The visor vanished. The dog walk stopped. Last I heard, her husband had listed the house and she was visiting family. The for sale sign had a little note underneath, no HOA communities preferred. The board held an emergency vote. Turns out when residents realize they can be fined for the wrong shade of happiness, they get motivated. The HOA voted to dissolve itself. The ugly entrance sign came down. Oakwood Glen went back to being a neighborhood instead of a police state with better landscaping. My kids still cannonball down that blue slide every single day. The laughter carries further now, because nobody's afraid of it anymore. I sit by the pool most evenings, hand trailing in the water the way my dad used to, and think about how something as stupid as a piece of plastic became the hill a petty tyrant chose to die on. She didn't hate the slide. She hated what it represented, joy that didn't ask her permission first. So here's the question I want you to answer honestly in the comments. Was the water slide the real problem, or was Karen just terrified of a world where someone could be happy without her approval? Who was actually violating the community, the guy who built something for his kids? Or the woman who weaponized rules to punish joy? Drop your HOA horror stories below. I'm reading every single one. And tell me, where are you watching from?